week. We went from Philippians to First, Second Chronicles, kind of a total, switching gears there, but kind of introduced a little bit about what First Chronicles is about, and talked about how you tied in with First, Second Samuel, First, Second Kings, First, Second Chronicles as well. But this series of lessons is not a verse by verse study. I mean, it's a story by story study. So we're not covering every verse of First and Second Chronicles or every story in it, but we are looking at some highlights in there to kind of get an idea of what it's about, and then also to help us as well, because we're skipping over a few chapters, well, quite a few chapters in your lesson 2 and your own First Chronicles 21. But let's go back to First Chronicles 17 and really begin. And you look at God talking to David. David's wanting to build a house of God, a temple. And we talked about that some last week, and God not making it for him, but for his son Solomon to do. But you get down to verse 8 of 1 Chronicles 17, he said, I have been with you wherever you have gone, and have cut off all your enemies from before you, and have made you a name like the name of the great men who are on the earth. Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may dwell in a place of their own, and move no more, nor shall the sons of wickedness oppress them any more as previously. Since the time that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, also I will subdue all your enemies. Furthermore, I tell you that the Lord will build you a house. And it shall be when your days are fulfilled, when you must go to be with your fathers, that I will set up your seed after you, who will be of your sons, and I will establish his kingdom. And he shall build me a house, and I'll establish his throne forever. I will be his father, he shall be my son. I will not take mercy away from him as I took it away from him who was before you. And he goes on talking about establishing his kingdom. You listen to this passage, what word? There's one word that stands out to me that you hear time and time again in that. What stands out to you? And that maybe I'm thinking totally different than anybody else will be thinking here. We look at some, you think with the rich fool that said, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger. Nebuchadnezzar, look at this king I built with my own, and all that. And we talk about self-centeredness or pride. But here's God saying, I have been with you. He goes on in verse 9 and says, I will appoint a place. Verse 10, you see, me, mine, my. What's the difference between God saying that and some other person saying that? That's what? Okay, that's not, no one can compete with God. He's God. I mean, if what? God meant it? Amen. Right. God, you say what you mean and mean what you say, kind of God does, doesn't he? I mean, it's one thing for God to say it, but he's God. He's deserving of all praise, all honor. He is all powerful, almighty. He's our God. And you look at the salvation he offers to us. I mean, he's the one that can say, I or me. But now with us, we're supposed to humble ourselves before him. And that's the point here. God's saying, David, who made you king? I did. David, who gave you all these victories? I did. David, who brought Israel into the land, established them in the land, got rid of them, whatever else? God can say, I did. And so he's trying to get David to understand that David shouldn't be saying, I, me, because it's God. And so God's saying, look, I'm in control. I'm the one who has given you the victories. And really, as you get on down, let's see, in chapter 18 and verse 1, after this it came to pass that David attacked the Philistines, subdued them, and took Gath and its towns from all the hands of the Philistines. You look as well in verse 2, he defeated Moab, and the Moabites became David's servants and brought him tribute. You go down to verse 5 and 6, when the Syrians of Damascus came to help Hadadezer, king of Zobah, David killed 22,000 of the Syrians And David put garrisons in Syria of Damascus, and the Syrians became David's servants and brought tribute. And then you get down to verse 12 and 13. Moreover, Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, killed 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. And so you have he put garrisons in Edom, and all the Edomites became David's servants. You see a running theme here. And so you have victory after victory in chapter 20. And in verse 1, you know, we look at, in chapter 21, it happened in the spring of the year at the time kings go out to battle that Joab led out the armed forces and ravaged the country of the people of Ammon and came and besieged Rabbah. But David stayed at Jerusalem, and Joab defeated Rabbah and overthrew it. So there's another victory he gave. At this time, David stayed home, but David did ultimately go and took the king's crown from his head, weighed it out and looked at the precious stones that were there as well. It was set on David's head, and he brought out the spoil of the city in great abundance. And so you see, God said, I'm going to give you victories. And God gives him victories over all these nations. And one of the things about the victories they had, the spoils that came with it would have brought in great wealth. I mean, you look at just this one crown, a talent of gold, and all the precious stones on it as well. And so there's power, there's wealth. But where did it come from? It came from God, didn't it? And David needed to remember that. But somewhere along the way, I think David had a little problem remembering some of those things. Yes. Do it, yeah, to wait and let God do things that he had planned later. God's timing is not always our timing, is it? And as we brought out last week, you know, David, as far as the temple, David was a man of great bloodshed, and God had a different plan in mind as far as, you know, Solomon being the one that came in and built the temple. And David did respect that. I mean, he gathered a lot of the materials together. He did respect God's will on that. But you get to chapter 21, where our lesson text picks up. God's given him all these victories. God's blessed him tremendously. God has promised David, it's one thing to know he's going to reign, but that his son's going to reign after him, and that God's not going to depart from him or take away the kingdom from him in the way that he did to Saul because of what Saul did. And so that's got to be a blessing to David. And he should have put his faith, well, you know, he's a man after God's own heart, but he's not perfect. He should have had his faith totally with God, but still he lost sight of some things along the way. Chapter 21 and verse 1, now Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel. Satan's at work. Can you think of some other instances in the scripture where it shows kind of behind the scenes and Satan at work? Who? That's the foremost one we look at is Job, where, you know, God says, behold my servant Job. And Satan thinks, well, I can take advantage of him. I can cause him to sin and to fall. I mean, you've blessed him so much. Take away some of those blessings and see where he winds up. But Job, through it all, was faithful, and God blessed him even more in the end than he did in the beginning. Anyone else that you see? Jesus in the wilderness, you know, had the temptations. Turn stone into bread, cast yourself down from the temple. I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world, the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. What's another example? King Saul? In what way? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, you look at, you see when he turned away from God and God withdrew his spirit from him, you see how that affected him. And really, you know, we can look at any one of us. You know, Satan tempts us and works at it in some ways. So you find the veil that's lifted and more directly shows, like again with this instance where it says Satan stood up against Israel, or where God and Satan are having that conversation about Job, or Jesus doing that as well. What about in the Garden of Eden? with Adam and Eve, the serpent in the garden as well. There's a New Testament example of someone that Satan mentioned. Do you remember that? One of the apostles. Yes, I mean, yeah. He and that's the point I'm going to make. You look at Satan. He had, Jesus said he's requested you. He's asked for you, Peter, that he wants to sift you as wheat. He's asked for you, and boy, he wanted to destroy Peter, and Peter did. I mean, he did deny the Lord, but he wept and repented and straightened his life up, and look how God used him, and Jesus really encouraged him afterwards. But we look at these instances where the veil's lifted, we'd see behind the scenes, and we don't know how often things like that take place. But as far as like where God and Satan, whatever goes on there. But as Sydney said, Satan does tempt us today. He'd love to sift us as wheat, or just to get us to be complacent and just not worry about Christ or Christianity or becoming a Christian or living the Christian life or whatever. But he's at work against us as well. But he's at work here against the man after God's own heart, against the king of Israel. I mean, he stood up against Israel. So he's trying to destroy God's people. And he thinks, well, I just chop off the head and can take care of the other people. And so he moves David to do something that David, that played off some wrong, I think, motives and intentions of David and caused him to number the people. We're told in Ephesians 6, to put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. It's the same Satan that's still working on us today that was working on them back then. And you wonder, hopefully he doesn't already have us on his side where he doesn't have to worry about me or worry about you. Hopefully God might look and say, behold my servant, me or you or whatever. But even if not that way, Satan would love to see us fall away. He'd love to see us lose our salvation. He'd love to see us be lost eternally. Misery loves company, and his misery loves company. So he says, put on the whole armor of God. You got to stand against the wiles of the devil. He said, our fight is not against flesh and blood. That's difficult enough. It's against principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this age, a spiritual host of wickedness in the heavenly places. And we talk about all the different parts of the armor of God. We understand the spiritual implications of it. But you go back to 1 Chronicles 21. Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel. So David said to Joab and to the leaders of the people, go number Israel from Beersheba to Dan and bring the number of them to me that I may know it. Now, it's kind of interesting. Joab, here's this rough and tough soldier, answered, may the Lord make his people 100 times more than they are. But my lord the king, are they not all my Lord's servants? Why then does my Lord require this thing? Why should he be a cause of guilt in Israel? Nevertheless, the king's word prevailed against Joab. Therefore, Joab departed and went through all Israel and came to Jerusalem. What was wrong with David numbering the people? I mean, there were some occasions that God did number the people. And what was wrong with this instance? Okay, he is supposed to depend on God. That's a good other answer. I mean, was there any specific thing that well, like I said, let's say I didn't go back and check all the text. I knew they had numbered at certain points, and one I almost mentioned in the class book, and I was trying to go back and see where let me go back and find that one scripture I was looking at. Like in Numbers 3, let's try that one. Numbers 3, beginning in verse 40. Like in Numbers 3 and verse 40, the Lord said to Moses, number all the firstborn males of the children of Israel from a month old and above, and take the number of their names, and you shall take the Levites from. He tells them, go out there and number certain ones within it. Now, when God tells you to go and number, it's fine to go and number. There's some other instances where God told them to number certain ones, or it was approved. But the problem seems to be in this, they weren't supposed to keep a number and, oh, well, how many, like with God had warned that your kings will store up horses or whatever and build your military and depend upon that more than really you depend upon God. And here, numbering it seems to be where David's making sure, hey, we can keep on fighting these battles and win the victories, because Joab understands where David's coming from, because Joab said, look, with God, may the Lord make his people 100 times more than they are. I mean, even if we have 1,000, with God, it's going to be 100,000 or more. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you have 1 or 1,000,000. If God's for you, if God, who can be against us? I mean, he should have had that dependency upon God, not so worried about, do we have enough men to go up against Syria? Do we have enough men to go up against the Philistines? They had enough men. What's that? Yep. Yeah, I mean, look at the source of it. It just says that Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel. How did he move him? I didn't say he appeared directly to him, but he's at work. How does the devil tempt us? I mean, he doesn't appear in a red suit and a pitchfork and a pointed tail, but he can place things before us, or situations that tempt us, that hit our weak points. That's why we are to flee the appearance of evil, resist the devil. So many times people kind of cuddle up to the devil and wonder what happened. Well, resist the devil, flee from it. And that temptation that's there, don't give in to it. But whatever the case may be, Satan was at work on David, and David's probably thinking to himself, we've been fighting these battles, we've been winning these victories. Let's number everyone so I'll know what our military strength is, know where the soldiers are, and make sure that we've got enough people to take care of it. And again, you go back to Joab. Joab realizes what David's doing. He goes, and we're in 1 Chronicles 21. 1 Chronicles 21 and verse 3. He realizes that David's worried about numbers here rather than trusting in God. And you think back with David, when he killed the bear and the lion, as a young man, killed Goliath. I mean, he was just like, you can come to me with whatever you want, Goliath, but I've got the Lord, and I'm going, he's going to give you to me. And David evidently kind of forgot about that for a while, to the point some serious things are going to happen. The king's word prevailed against Joab. He didn't listen to Joab. And so Joab did what the king told him to do. He goes out and numbers the people. And he comes back to him, and all Israel had 1,100,000 men who drew the sword. Judah had 470,000 men who drew the sword. He didn't count the Levites and Benjamin among them, for the king's word was an abomination to Joab. Even Joab realized this isn't right, what's going on here. And but the bottom line is, it's not just Joab that's displeased. God was displeased, verse 7 says. Yes. Yeah, that's what Gideon was, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, whether it's the 300 men with Gideon, whether it's marching around the walls of Jericho and the walls come tumbling down, whether, it's just a small group of men, God's shown them again and again and again and again, I'm the one giving you the victory. It's because you're my people and I'm your God. And God promised to continue to bless them and protect them as long as they weren't supposed to go out and intermarry with these other nations and bring in their pagan ideas. They weren't supposed to worship idols, and yet they did both. And they sinned in many other ways as well. And so God punished them. But here David is, here's a great king, again described as a man after God's own heart, a man of great faith. But you see at times, you think about being a king of God's people, winning all these victories, it can go to your head, and you can be filled with pride, and he might be beginning to think, it's me. It's look who I am. Look at how great I am. Look what happened to Saul, but now look at me. Look how God. Maybe he thought God had blessed him, but still, it's him rather than just God. And so God was displeased with it, and he struck Israel. Why do you think God struck Israel rather than just striking David down? Any thoughts? They're looking to the king, aren't they? And like you say, it's pressuring them in that way. Our sins affect other people. If no man is an island, and we have interaction with others. You look at even Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Through one man, sin entered the world, and death because of that as well. Of course, the thing is, we all sin, so we deserve that. But the point is, those actions there affected the rest of people that live. And we look at today, when we sin, it can affect a husband or a wife. It can affect our children or our children's children. It can affect maybe the workplace that we're working in, depending on what we're doing. A person that goes out and runs around, it ruins lives. The person that's doing that's life, and the one that are with them and their families as well. It affects so many people in so many ways. And, so again, David, as the leader, was leading the people in the wrong way. You see when the kingdom split, the southern kingdom, or the northern kingdom, I should say, had wicked king after wicked king. The southern kingdom had a bunch of wicked kings in and out, but as well. And they led the people's heart away from God. But still, God struck Israel because, again, it's David that sinned, and it brought on this thing. In fact, David said, I have sinned greatly because I have done this thing, but now I pray, take away the iniquity of your servant, for I've done very foolishly. It got David's attention when God struck all of Israel, and things began to happen there. It woke David up, kind of like when Nathan said, thou art the man, with his sin with Bathsheba. Here, I think it got his attention as well, that what he's doing is affecting not only himself, but Joab going out and numbering the people being numbered, and they'll begin to put their reliance on themselves rather than God. They're saying, well, why is David out here numbering us? He's making sure we're strong enough. And it leads them in the wrong way. But David realized, look, I've sinned greatly. He woke up and said, this is bad. I've sinned.
God demonstrated to David the strength that you think you'll have in his numbers. I can take that away. In other words, when he afflicts Israel, he is overriding what David's trying to do. You number, you're looking for war.
True.
So God is decimating what he thinks he has.
Okay, so you think you've got plenty of men to win the victory? Let me show you what happens when I'm against you. Yeah. That's a very good point there, and you're drawing from numbers. Well, let me show you, numbers don't always equal victory. Yes. So the enemies of God's people learn that many a time, but that's a good object lesson. A direct, I'm not as good at reading directions as I am seeing an illustration, and God gave that illustration there to him, and it woke David up. Wait a minute now. If as strong as we are, as many victories as we won, if God's against us, what good is that? That's a good point. Other thoughts, comments. Appreciate that one. He just said, take away the iniquity of your servant, for I've done foolishly. That's the way he was when he sinned with Bathsheba. Please don't take your spirit away from me. I've sinned. Forgive. He asked for forgiveness, and God forgave him. And here, though, the Lord spoke to Gad, David's seer, saying, go and tell David, saying, thus says the Lord, I offer you three things. Choose one of them for yourself, that I may do it to you. You got three options. Remember, let's make a deal. Door number one, door number two, door number three. The worst thing that would happen on that, I remember they'd open up a door and there'd be a donkey back there, and you might like donkeys and say that's good, but most people were like, I don't want that one, or something silly. But God offers him three choices, and none of them are a good choice. They're not good. But God does offer him a choice, which is kind of interesting here. You got three choices, David. Which one do you want? And so David says, the Lord said, choose for yourself. Which would you want? You got 3 years of famine, 3 months to be defeated by your foes with the sword of your enemies overtaking you, or else for 3 days the sword of the Lord, the plague in the land, with the angel of the Lord destroying throughout all the territory of Israel. Now consider what answer I should take back to him who sent me. What are you going to say to God? I mean, none of those are really good. I mean, you think about 3 years of famine. What would happen in 3 years of famine? A lot of people would die, wouldn't they? I mean, it would be hard. It'd be hard. It'd be stressful. You look back at Joseph when he was in Egypt, and you had those years of famine, then years of plenty, then the years of famine. If God had not had Joseph prepare for the years of famine, think what it would be like. Joseph saved not only himself and his family, but many others as well because of God's help. So you think about 3 years of famine would be terrible. 3 months to be defeated by your foes with the sword of your enemy. You know, the enemies back then were very vicious people. I mean, we look at what's going on in Iran and the fighting that's going on there, and there's some viciousness among the leadership there within the government in Iran. And I mean, you look at those that public executions that take place, or people being and stuff. I mean, war is ugly to say the least. Back in this day and age, David's day and age, you know, you'd have people killed in very gruesome ways, or wishing they had been killed, you know, because of how they are treated and how they treated the enemies. And you think about having to go through that for 3 months. That's a long time. I mean, you know, you may think I can go through anything for 3 months, but that's still a long time for the enemy to be coming in and ransacking and killing your people, just running through the land. Or you're down to 3 days. Well, you say, well, 3 days is not so bad, but what's going to happen for 3 days? You're going to have the angel of the Lord destroying throughout all the territory of Israel. What could the angel of the Lord do in 3 days if he wanted to? He could wipe everything out, couldn't he? I mean, you know, he could destroy everything. And so that's difficult. I mean, the sword of the Lord, the plague in the land. And so using a plague there as well. And so David said to Gad, I am in great distress. Please let me fall into the hand of the Lord, for his mercies are very great, but do not let me fall into the hand of man. That's some great wisdom there, isn't it? You know, you look at these enemies that are out there, the Syrians, Philistines, whoever else you want to fill in the blank with, and just the viciousness of them, and how they would just love to get a hold of David or some of his soldiers and torture and kill them, and just make it very terrible, to say the least. And David said, yeah, that's the last thing any soldier wants, is to fall into enemy hands. Even today, you know, we go to great lengths to try, if a person, like when those pilots had to eject over Iran, went to great lengths to bring them back because they didn't want to fall into enemy hands. We understand what all is involved in that. And David just thought, I don't want that. I don't want to fall into the hands of man. Man, you know, doesn't try to do the right thing or won't treat you in any merciful way. But he said, even when the Lord is punishing me, I'd rather be from the Lord with his mercy, knowing my penitent heart, my humble heart. David's just saying, I'd rather fall into his hands. And so the Lord sent a plague upon Israel, and 70,000 men of Israel fell. Boy, that's a lot, isn't it? 70,000 men. And again, that made a point to David. God could wipe out the whole army if he wanted to. God could bring defeat there if he wanted to. God sent an angel to Jerusalem to destroy it, and he was destroying. The Lord looked and relented of the disaster and said to the angel who was destroying, it is enough, now restrain your hand. And so, I mean, it's not that God said, I made a mistake, but he's pulling back from that, saying, you know, this is enough. You know, it's gone far enough. And that, you know, you look back at David understood that God had great mercy, and God would go to a point on this, but he restrained the angel that was there and said, restrain your hand. And the angel of the Lord stood by the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. Then David lifted his eyes and saw the angel of the Lord standing between earth and heaven. You can imagine this angel that's there, and evidently in a picture of a great being, having in his hand a drawn sword stretched out over Jerusalem. So David and the elders that were with him, clothed in sackcloth, fell on their faces. And David said to God, was it not I who commanded the people to be numbered? I am the one who has sinned and done evil indeed. But these sheep, what have they done? Let your hand, I pray, O my God, be against me and my father's house, but not against your people, that they should be plagued. And so, he's humbled. He's penitent. He's taking the blame there. The angel of the Lord commanded Gad to say to David that David should go and erect an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. The book brings out this is the same event. This land is the same place where the temple would later be built as well. Kind of an interesting background to that. So David went up at the word of the Lord, the word of Gad. Here he's listening to the prophet of God tell him what to do this time. He's listening to what God wants. And his 4 sons who were, which he had spoken in the name of the Lord. Now Ornan turned and saw the angel. His 4 sons who were with him hid themselves, but Ornan continued threshing wheat. And David told him that he wanted to use that land to build an altar and a sacrifice to God. And Ornan does what he says and basically gives him the threshing floor and everything that he would need. But David refused it. He says, in verse 24, King David said to Ornan, no, but I will surely buy it for the full price. Don't give it to me. Don't give me a discount on it, because this is a sacrifice to God. This is for my sins. How can you give God anything that costs me nothing? He said, offer burnt offerings with that which costs me nothing. I mean, it's a sacrifice. It's supposed to cost you in some way or another. And so David gave Ornan 600 shekels of gold by weight for the place. And David built there an altar for the Lord, offered burnt offerings and peace offerings, and called on the Lord, and he answered him from heaven by fire on the altar of burnt offering. I mean, it got David's attention. I mean, here's the king with all authority and thinks he can do what he wants. That's why I think he said, when he sinned with Bathsheba, against you and you only have I sinned, talking to God. I mean, he'd sinned against Bathsheba, against Uriah, and against really the military leaders that saw to it that the Uriah was killed. I mean, he sinned against a bunch of folks, but he was only really answerable to one, and that's God. And David here had learned that as well. I mean, I'm answerable to God. God's the one in control. He's the one who gave me the victories. He's the one that can destroy us as well. And so he is repentant toward God, and he offers that sacrifice to God. God accepts it and offers forgiveness to him. And the Lord commanded the angel, and he returned his sword to its sheath. You can imagine the relief when he puts his weapon away. And at that time, when David saw that the Lord had answered him on the threshing floor of Ornan Jebusite, he sacrificed there. For the tabernacle of the Lord and the altar of burnt offering which Moses had made in the wilderness were at that time at the high places in Gibeon. But David could not go before it to inquire of God, for he was afraid of the sword of the angel of the Lord. Why was David afraid? Because he knew he had sinned? Yeah. At the very least, lose the Spirit of the Lord like Saul did, or possibly lose his life. I mean, he realized how close he came to being destroyed. I mean, and he realized that really he trusted in his might and his strength, and forgot for a time it came from God. Yeah. That's true. You look back at his shepherd's heart. He does care for. I mean, he's pulling it back to himself. He's saying, "It's me. It's me. Go ahead and kill me if you have to, but don't hurt the innocent ones." You ever do something and it affects other people and you feel so bad? I mean, it's one thing when it affects you. It's not necessarily maybe something sinful, but you make a decision and you realize, well, I gave them the wrong advice, and it hurts those around you. Or if you make a choice and you realize it was a selfish choice and it hurts other people, or something sinful, And you realize, boy, this didn't just hurt me. I was thinking about myself all along, and now it's hurting the ones I love the most. And you look at the heart of David there. I mean, he's saying, God, I understand I messed up. And if you have to punish me, punish me. But I love these people. And not every king would say that. Other kings would say, oh, go ahead and wipe them out. I can start over. Right. I mean, they could see that, when you start looking at, you look at the men that lap up the water versus those that take the water up into their hands, and you start looking at you break the pitchers and blow the trumpets or whatever. I mean, that let people know, hey, it's not us. But like you say, when they begin, hey, why is he numbering us? And he's getting all these counts in there. It's because we've turned into a pretty good military here. Look at the victories we've had. They were reminded at Ai about sin in the camp, taking the spoil when they weren't supposed to. God reminded them, and they got things straight there. And here's another reminder as well. But, David, where he at times could make some selfish decisions, like with Bathsheba, at the same time, ultimately, you see why he's a man after God's own heart, and that heart came out, and he didn't, God, you do what you got to do to me. And he begged for mercy, from God, sure. But he didn't want to see the other people suffer because God had lifted him up. God could bring them down. And he was afraid of the sword of the angel of the Lord. We stress God is love, and God is love. But there's the goodness and the severity of God. Do we really fear God? Do we really reverence him? Do we understand God means what he says, not only about heaven, but about hell? And not only about reward, but about punishment. I mean, there needs to be that fear of God in the right way. I remember as a child, I didn't want to push my parents too far. I didn't want to get a spanking. You learn, if you go to a certain point, that spanking's coming, or that punishment's coming of some kind or another. Did I love them? Yes, absolutely. I love my parents, and I knew they loved me. And I can look back and realize that the punishments were because they loved me. With God, David realized he's not just going to overlook every single thing that happens. There's accountability that's there, and ultimately he submitted to God's will and begged for forgiveness. But it shows us there's consequence to sin, and we can judge them and think about it, but also we can look at ourselves and ask ourselves, how much do we trust in ourselves rather than trusting in God? Any other comments as we close out? We will take up lesson 3, God's dwelling place, and we'll go on to chapter 22. We'll go into the next chapter this time. I appreciate the good comments that were made.